Good evening, everyone. And welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. Tonight, we're going to continue on examining the practice of meditation, specifically continuing on working with the emotions. And I think I'd like to start out by just saying something very general about meditation practice altogether. And that is that it is fundamentally without goal. It's the practice of becoming aware of one's life. And even that awareness is fundamentally goalless. It's like right now, you're looking at me and you're just easily, some of you, naturally aware of this object sitting in front of you, this person, these sounds coming out of my mouth. Oh, thank you. And we don't really have to try. In fact, the effort to be aware, if you're telling yourself, I should be aware now, I should be aware of John or aware of what he's saying, and that very command, that injunction that you give yourself gets in the way. You can't hear what I'm saying. You can't quite see me as clearly if you're busy telling yourself that. That has to relax and go away. So the active awareness is just very open and in the moment and easy, utterly easy, completely relaxed. What do we got? Needs louder? Okay. And here's the really funny part, is that awareness, the act of meditation, is to be applied to absolutely everything, without exception. Whatever arises in your experience, just as right now you're so easily and effortlessly aware of what's going on in this present moment. You may be having thoughts now and then, but your fundamental awareness of here just goes on. And you might have a thought that takes you away for a moment, but then you come back. And when you come back, it's effortless. Right? Yeah. Just simply here. That effortless awareness is the core of meditation. And it is to be applied to everything, to every thought, every emotion that comes up in your mind, as well as to every sensory experience that you might have, every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, all of it is meant for you to be aware of as these things arise and pass away in this present moment. And if one sits here and thinks, I don't know if I'm doing it right, be aware of that. That's all you have to do. Be aware of that. And you're doing it right. If you think, I'll never get this, or maybe someday I'll be a great meditator, and there's that feeling of, like I'm not a good meditator now, be aware of that. And know that is perfect meditation. So what it means, you see, is that what we're really giving up, the Buddha defined suffering as, the word dukkha in Sanskrit means, usually has been translated as dissatisfaction. That you feel like what I've got now isn't as good as what it should be, or what I had in the past needs to be improved, Dissatisfaction. That is given up. Every time one comes back into awareness, you give up that motion, that activity, that thought of being dissatisfied. It's sort of squeezed out. And if you're still dissatisfied, then you be aware of that. It's relentless, this process of waking up. And what it amounts to is shifting our loyalty. When we don't understand meditation, our loyalty is toward the past and the future, and the stories we tell about these things. I screwed up in the past. I'll never get it back. It's just terrible. I'm reaping the terrible effects of those mistakes now. Maybe someday in the future I can make it right. And we spin out this dream, all kinds of dreams, stories that we tell ourselves that are fraught with unhappiness. And then we wake up. We say, ooh, I'm lost in a dream. And in that moment, we're coming back. We're becoming a meditator again, where we're becoming awake. We're coming back to awareness of what's going on in the present, which is this dream of past and future unhappiness. And we're giving up that fundamental suffering that the Buddha talked about, the dissatisfaction. Because there's no room for dissatisfaction in awareness. It's like it's not here. It's like the sun, it's like dew that the sun evaporates, the sun of awareness. You're just here, simple, relaxed, open, aware of whatever that comes up. So what happens is we get hooked. We get hooked by these repetitive stories that we've developed that come up again and again. This is the action of karma that enslaves people, makes them confused and suffer. These stories of good and bad, hope and fear, past and future, and they're fraught with anxiety about me. They're a story about me. And these stories, as soon as we get caught in them, they have an intellectual aspect, sort of a conceptual aspect, you might say, the story itself. And then they have an energetic aspect, which is the sort of the pure emotional quality. But that's really what an emotion is. It has a conceptual storyline, and then it is driven by this emotion. Trungpa Rinpoche said that the emotions are like water. The water is the energy into which you poured paint. The paint is the concept, the story. And these stories are always past and future oriented. They're like, I screwed up in the past. I have suffered a terrible loss. I'll never recoup. Or they might be future oriented. Oh, I hope someday, I'll be happy. Someday I'll find true love. Someday I'll be rich. Someday I'll be famous and adored. Someday, whatever it is, I'll get to heaven. My particular version of, or versions, multiple versions of heaven. And we spend a lot of our lives caught on this emotional treadmill where we're telling ourselves the stories. And the stories, when we get lost in them, they really have this possibility of sort of ratcheting up the feeling, the emotion, the energetic aspect. So our depression, if it's a depressed story, can just build, and suddenly we find we're terribly depressed, and we need to find some release from our depression, and we might go to a movie, or we might have a drink, or shoot up heroin, or whatever it is we're going to do to try and get relief from that storyline and its concomitant self-destructive energy. Self-attacking. Even hope is fundamentally a form of self-attack, because it says, I don't have what I want, but maybe someday I'll get it. I think I've told you there was this bumper sticker I once saw in Boulder that I always loved. I don't know where. I've never seen it since. It just said, now that I've given up hope, I feel so much better. And I remember Trungpa Rinpoche exhorting his students, please give up hope. Please give up hope, he would say in lectures. I mean, it's kind of the reverse. Everybody thinks hope is such a great thing. Oh, you should have hope. And from a Buddhist perspective, it's a form of self-torture and a way of exiting our lives in the present, to sort of become lost in dreams of the future. So, really, the constant refrain, the constant command or injunction or recommendation, the piece of advice that we've got again and again and again is come back. Come back. When we lose our minds, come back. Come back to what? Come back to whatever it is. Come back to the fact that you've lost your mind. Come back to the dream to realize you're dreaming. It doesn't matter. It's just come back. It's hard because we think there's this ideal state of meditation. We all, do somehow subtly or grossly in our minds. We think, if I could get rid of all these thoughts and just relax into perfect awareness of the present moment, the space, the forms, the sounds, then I'd be a Buddha. But that isn't it. If you do that, then you set yourself this impossible task of getting rid of thought. You can't get rid of thought. Thought's a natural part of mind. Now, thought is the analogy that's given in the teachings. If the mind is the ocean, thoughts are the waves. They're natural. Trungpa Rinpoche said, if the mind is a mountain, the thoughts are the lambs gambling on it. You see, or the clouds drifting across it. That come and go. They're a natural part of it. So the trick is not to be thoughtless. The trick is to accept it all as part of your awareness. All of it, every bit of it. Nothing is excluded. There is nothing that is unholy, sacrosanct, off limits. Every single part of your life, your mind, your emotional life, it's all grist for the mill. It's all what you come back to. And the funny thing is that when you do, you lose purpose. You lose that neurotic purpose. You still might have some interesting purposes. You might want to be of help in the world. That could be inspiring, to be of use, to be of benefit to others, to be kind, to make something creative, to make something beautiful, a work of art, a communication. We might do all that. Might find it very inspiring in the present. But what we lose is that forward-leaning, hopeful and fearfully driven dream that constantly that we've given our allegiance to. We're switching our allegiance. We're saying, screw that. I'm not going to be loyal to that anymore. That idea of good and bad in the future and the past. I'm junking it. I'm going to be loyal to this. Whatever this is, as it arises now. And it arises so richly and colorfully and beautifully and real. It's real. The rest of it's dreams. Most of it's thoughts, creations. So you can do a practice of actually working with the emotions where you're sitting like this. And I'm going to lead us through it. And the way we do is we take a good posture, not because there's any particular virtue in the posture, but just it kind of disposes of our bodies in a way that allows us to perhaps be more aware. That's a tricky one. Then you could make awareness into this thing that you're striving for. Was I aware? No, I wasn't aware. I could be more aware. Maybe I'll be more aware tomorrow or in the next minute, or then you could beat yourself up for that, and we do, don't we? And we let it go, and we just be, then you say, be aware of that. That's fine. Be aware of that. Everything is a valid, equally valid object of our meditation practice, of our wake-up, of our awareness. Nothing is more valid than anything else. Nothing is holier. So here's this exercise. The way we're going to do this is we're going to start with working with the breath. And the purpose of working with the breath is, in this instance, is to feel the breath. So we're going to feel it as it exits our nostrils and goes out into the space, and as it comes back in. We're going to get what Pema calls the felt sense of the breath. And we're going to do that for a little bit. And then we're going to conjure an emotion. And I would suggest maybe pick one that's been powerful for you and has a good story. That, you see, the story conjures up the energy. You tell yourself the story and it brings up, it might be a story of being wronged and it brings up feelings of anger and resentment. It might be a story of loss and it brings up feelings of poverty and fear and panic. It might be a story of love and how, you were given this wonderful thing and how joyful it was and how ephemeral, and passing, but it was really, you could feel the quality of the joy in that story. So think of the story that you're going to tell yourself, because what we're going to do is we're going to work with the breath, and then we're going to take a minute remembering this story of our favorite emotion, or the emotion of the day, the flavor of the day. And we're going to tell it to ourselves, and then we're going to feel it. And then what we're going to do is, and I'm going to guide you through this, is we're going to, after a few minutes of telling the story and feeling that power of the energy that informs it, the hatred or the fear or the lust or the passion or the delight or the joy or whatever it might be, then we're going to cut the story. We're going to let the story go. We're going to wake up, as it were, from the dream. And still the quality of the energy persists, and you can feel that energy the way you can feel the breath, the felt quality of the energy. And you stay with it for a while and see what happens. And then we'll talk. So we'll start with working with the breath. And we have a nice posture, just because it makes us more alert. And we're working with the breath, coming up, exiting our nostrils, goes out into the space, and it dissolves. And we're just right here, in this space. There's nothing that is a distraction, but the breath is like a highlight. It goes out, and we can feel it, the felt quality of the breath. Comes up, exits our nostrils. It's kind of nice, it's friendly. That felt quality of the breath going out. Familiar, gentle, has a kindness to it, a softness. Comes up, goes out, it dissolves. And we'll just do that. And if there are thoughts, that's fine. The thoughts come and go. They're like the clouds. They come and go across the sky. They're just weather. Don't worry about them. Thoughts are part of it. And we're feeling the quality of the breath. Now bring to mind a story you've chosen that's powerful for you. And tell it for a while and feel the energy that informs it. And whenever you're ready, you can just let the story go and feel the emotion, the energy, same way you were feeling the breath. So if you've been telling yourself the story, let it go and see or feel that energy that it was carrying, arousing. Okay, we could stop here. Any comments? Questions? Peter, pass in the mic. Wait, we're going to pass you the mic.
I just wanted to share my my experience. There's a particular thing which I've been obsessing about for the last couple of days, and it's my favorite catastrophic story, my favorite catastrophic expectation that has taken place, and really gets to me, and I become quite obsessive, and so on and so on. And that's the space that I have, for the most part, been in for the past few days. And then you said I think you said something about waking up. And I said to myself, wake up. And I felt literally as though I was lifting myself up and leaving below all that stuff, you know. And suddenly things looked to be a lot brighter, and there was more space, and that's particularly the space, and I had this insight that I still carry around with me, the habitual pattern of trying to solve things by thinking them out. But here was this still relatively, even after all this time, unfamiliar experience of there not being any thought, of just simply, I guess, being in the space and being uplifted, and that I experienced myself as completely different, as someone who was bright and cheerful and uplifted. And as I said, it seemed that below there was all this kind of morass that was swirling around, but not something that in that moment affected me. So I just
Not something what?
Not something that in that moment of coming up, I would almost say coming up, did not affect me in the way that I was being affected for the past few days. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that experience.
Okay.
Surprise.
When does this experience come on you?
When certain circumstances occur,
Could be any time of the day?
No, it is something that happens when there's a kind of betrayal. I don't mean romantic relationship, but a betrayal, or in the sense of being taken advantage of in some way.
Right.
I would say feeling of being taken advantage of, or being trashed,
Mm-hmm.
But of course, trash is part of the content of the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a word that I use in the story, and it's very painful.
Yeah.
And all-consuming. And as I said, the kind of one of the maybe my most catastrophic expectation, and then it occurs, and I kind of take off,
They're really demons, these things, aren't they?
Oh, totally, haunting, and just kind of sitting up, and
I mean, the trick again and again is when this demon appears in its full flower, with all its glory, to welcome it. To welcome it as your next object of awareness, just like you would your breath. To welcome it, to give it a kind of kindness in a way. I mean, it's not like you're going to be smarmy about it, but it's that welcoming or that allowing it to be there is a kind of generosity on your part. And the thing is, it's just, it's like in the 100,000 Songs, remember, of Milarepa? Milarepa was a great yogi who lived in the 11th century in Tibet. And there are these songs about his bouts with the demoness, Tsaringma, her name was. And she appears in his cave one day. He's in his cave meditating. He's a solitary yogi. And all he had to eat was nettle soup, and he drank so much nettle soup his skin turned green, so he's always green in the paintings of him, supposedly. And she shows up and she bites his toe. And he says to her, "Oh, Tsaringma," this is what we might say to our demons, like this. "Don't you realize I'm a holy yogi, and I'm treading the path of Dharma to enlightenment, and you are obstructing me, and you're going to, accumulate a lot of bad karma by doing this, by trying to get in my path, in the way of my path." And she says to him, "You're just trying to get rid of me." And she bites him all the harder. She won't let go. And that goes on until finally he accepts her. And when he accepts her, she turns into an ally. She becomes the goddess Tsaringma who helps him. And this is an analogy for the way we deal with these terrible emotional stories that we tell ourselves, like Peter is describing. I find for myself the time I'm most vulnerable is when I wake up in the morning. Anybody experience that? That's most vulnerable to depression. And what I've done over the years is I pry myself out of bed, and I get to the bathroom, and I pee, and I brush my teeth, and do what I'm going to do. And as I'm doing that, the very sensory experiences crowd out those depressed, unhappy thoughts that I was having in bed. But you see, I'm using sensory experiences there the way you might use a TV show or a drug, to bring you out of the thoughts. And that's okay, it's better than using drugs. But what is really the practice is to say, okay, these thoughts that I'm having right now, these depressed thoughts, I'm going to make them the object of my awareness. And in order to do that, you have to stop thinking the story, because if you're thinking the story, telling yourself how bad it is and how terrible it's going to be and blah, 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 then you're still lost in the dream. It's like you're a sleepwalker. But as soon as you realize you're doing that, then you're not anymore. And to go back into it is a form of self-indulgence, but you could stay with it, with that feeling of whatever it was, anxiety, depression, fury, whatever you've got. You could make that the object of your meditation. Welcome it, the way Milarepa did Saringma. It's harder to do when we're sitting here in this group, because just by virtue of being in a group setting, we feel a lot better. It eases whatever lonely terrors we experience. They really come at us harder when we're alone and we have no friends around. So I recommend Pema's book, How to Meditate. It's really terrific. She's really great. And she emphasizes this, maybe not as much as I am, but that absolutely everything, including your demons, are to be welcomed as objects of awareness in the present moment, as the inhabitants of our world, our life as it arises now. There is nothing that we have to turn away from. You might want to work with it, in a creative way. If we're dreaming about our livelihood situation, well, there's stuff to do, about livelihood or a romantic situation. Well, there's stuff to do, whatever it might be. Creativity, we're going to be creative. But the first step is to cut the story by waking up, by becoming aware that you're having it, and then to welcome it as an object of meditation, just the way we did the breath. You feel it, just the way we were feeling the breath, that felt awareness of the energy. And the funny thing is, then we might really become yogis. Then we might really become samurai, brave warriors, in the sense of being willing to be just who we are on the spot, ready to embrace anything, whatever is coming.
It actually becomes, at least for me, somewhat exciting.
Wait a second. The microphone.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, if it transforms into something exciting. It reminds me of what Fritz Perls said. He said anxiety is repressed excitement. So that I don't know if you ever heard that before.
No, I never heard that.
It's you're suppressing excitement, and that's because you're holding it in. It turns into anxiety. So again, with somewhat of a surprised feeling, the content. And the anxiety and the anguish, I would call it anguish because it's obsessive anguish, turns into kind of excitement. And, that's that way. And I think that is an illustration of what Perls was saying, that kind of change, that kind of, if one acknowledges it and welcomes it and so on. Also reminds me of that the Rumi poem, the Guest House. Are you familiar with that?
By whom?
Rumi.
Rumi. Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I don't remember it, but I can paraphrase it. That he says, if if you're visited by, slovenly people and demons and terrible people, welcome them in. Welcome them in, because they could be the harbinger of good things to come. So don't try and push them out, but welcome them into your space, into your home.
Yeah.
Very much the same thing, no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe you just welcome them in just because
invite them in, yeah.
They're worth welcoming.
Hmm?
Because they're worth welcoming, because who you thought was a demon might turn out to be somebody quite different.
Uh-huh. There's all kinds of illustrations of that. The dreams in which one is being chased by something or someone, rather than run away. If you turn around and face them, they'll sometimes transform into allies on the spot. So, and finally it makes me, reminds me of the Sakyang's book, Turning the Mind into an Ally.
Yeah.
That's really what we're doing, no?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Welcome.
Alan.
Somewhat tangential here. It reminds me of the story that you surely know in probably greater detail, in the days when Rinpoche was hanging around with a lot of hippies, and they would sort of invade his living space, and his students didn't know what to do, and he said, well, that's okay, let them come in, just make sure they wash the dishes. So, put your demons to work for you. But going back to something, what Peter is saying, it sounds somewhat analogous, or quite analogous, to the sense of liberating the energy of the emotion, and one feels joyful. One feels that sense of being liberated, the burden being lifted.
And to me, the thing that's so liberating is the idea that we could be free of wanting it to be different, of wanting it to be better, of wishing it hadn't been and could be. I mean, what a terrible burden that is that we carry. And that the way to free ourselves from it is just waking up, coming back, getting unhooked from the story, and waking up and coming back to what's going on in the present moment again and again. And there is no perfect state. If we think that we're not in a perfect state, be aware of that. There's no perfect state. Just giving up that allegiance we have to the past and the future, and switching our allegiance to now. That's what, and I'm using language, this by the way is Trungpa Rinpoche's language. He talked about switching allegiance. He called it from samsara to nirvana. But, it's from confusion to sanity.
Switching what?
Allegiance.
Allegiance, yes.
Michael.
When using language to describe these things, I think it's always true that you can be pointing at the same thing from many different directions, and sometimes contradictory things will point to the same thing. They don't necessarily need to be. The different ways of describing these experiences don't necessarily need to agree with each other or seem consistent. And one thing that I've noticed when I work with people around meditation is this coming back thing, where when people tell me, when I ask them to describe their experience and they say they came back, I say, you didn't go anywhere. You were right there the whole time. I saw you. You didn't come back. You didn't go. You're right where you started the whole time.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which sometimes this imagery the imagery of going and coming and returning with the mind can turn into a game and can be unhelpful sometimes. Letting go also, I find sometimes, that's, where is that operation coming from of the physicality of the letting go part, All you need to do is feel your breath.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to let go of anything,
Mm-hmm.
When I work with people who are very anxious or obsessive, they get very engaged with these little details. In these little details of, how do I let go? What do you mean let go? What does let go mean? How do you do it? What do I do? What am I holding? With what am I holding it?
Right.
It becomes a whole other world of trouble,
Really.
But it's, as you said, all that you need to do is feel your breath. You don't need to let go of anything. You just feel the breath. And that's, sometimes that can be, and you don't have to come back either, because you didn't go anywhere. That's, you think you went somewhere, but to sort of speak in terms of having gone somewhere and coming back sort of reinforces the importance of that thought in some ways.
Mm.
And this is not original with me. This is, there are many levels of the way shamatha is given in instruction, including the levels within Mahamudra and within Dzogchen, which tend to be less detailed and have less imagery in it, And that's, as I was saying in the beginning, these different ways of describing the experience can sound like they're arguing with each other, but in fact, the explanations are not important.
Yeah.
It's having someone have the experience that's important.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Skillful means. Yeah. Works differently for everybody. I think it's a matter of self-acceptance. That's another way of it. Trying it. We're so hard on ourselves. We beat ourselves up so much. And that's where I think the anxiety comes from. We say, I'm not good enough. I need to be better. I remember, again, Trungpa Rinpoche, saying self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin. And remember, he stressed again and again, confidence, confidence, confidence. The Shambhala teachings are all based on confidence. Confidence what? Confidence to just relax and be who we are, and to be aware of that. It's a form of self-love, self-acceptance. So what I hear is that you're using skillful techniques to help people be kind to themselves and not be hard on them. Yeah? Great. Tim?
At some point in my life, I think I got into the habit of making plans for the future that didn't really serve me. And it may have been a gift from my mother, because I think she thought that people who didn't have a plan were inferior in some way, or it may have been an expression of her fear that her plans were a defense against the unknown. But I experienced a lot of frustration when things didn't work out the way I thought they should, which was either that I was defective in some way because my plans were not adequate, or that reality was out to get me because it refused to comply with my expectations. And so recently I became more aware of recognizing and labeling frustration when it arises. And I also realized that in many, many cases my expectations were unrealistic. In fact, I shouldn't have had any expectations whatsoever. And so now when I recognize frustration arising before it really gets me by the neck, to me it's a reminder that I've fallen back into the planning habit again. And so frustration used to be a negative emotion because it was unpleasant, and now it's like a friend like tapping me on the head saying, oh, see, you're going back to the expectations again. So that to me sounds like what you're talking about, welcoming something that used to be negative, or seeing the reverse side of something in a way that's actually helpful.
Mm. Mm. Thank you.
I was just going to say along those lines that I feel like for me, negative emotions are also they're like a neon sign flashing, like pointing at. For me, usually it points in the direction of like a fear or an insecurity that I have, right? So, so when I like to work with those emotions, and I think about the Milarepa story, I feel like the next step is not just inviting the demon in, and the demon in this case being, maybe a strong negative emotion, but it's actually not just inviting the demon down to tea, but like really actually engaging the demon in a conversation and getting to know the demon and getting to know the quirks and the idiosyncrasies of the demon, getting to know the demon as well as you can, because the better you get to know that demon, the less, the more you get to know yourself and understand, the nature and the source of where that all comes from, and the less scary it becomes, I don't think there was a question there, but
that's great. Thank you. Courtney.
The emotion that I default to the most is sadness, which can default to depression, and I find that, like we've said, it's like it's something that I can't think myself out of. I don't think there maybe is anything we can really think ourselves out of. And I find that if I can get out of the house, I'm like you, if you can get out of your bed and brush your teeth, if I can get out of my house, especially in this city, it's just everything feels available to touch in some way without even looking for it. I tend, in my sadness, I can feel lost opportunities, grief over a whole a whole trail of lost things. And just as an example of the things we're talking about that can help, what for each one of us can help us let go. I'm always late getting anywhere. I have a real issue with time, and tonight when I was on my way, I was late as always, and I got to Bergen Street, and there was a train that came in just as I was going down the stairs, and I knew I wasn't going to get it. I knew I wasn't going to get it, and I got through the turnstile just as the doors had closed, and the conductor, was still leaning out of his cab, and I kind of just went like this to him, and he went like this.
She's going like that for the camera.
It really amused me, and it struck me so, it was so sweet. It was so sweet. I didn't get what I wanted, but it was so sweet, and I went back I made the same gesture back to him.
Yeah, I think you just converted Seringma from a demon to a goddess when you did that. Yeah.
I've also had problems with being late, less recently, more in the past, but I also remember being very frustrated about being late. And sometimes now, I don't like to be late because I think it's disrespectful to other people, but sometimes there are circumstances beyond our control, and often when I accept that I'm going to be late and just let it go, because I'm late. I can sit there and stew in like a boiling vat of regret and frustration, or I can just keep moving. And option A doesn't work very well, as it turns out. So that's an extra layer of suffering that I think I'm frosting the circumstances with.
Well, what I'm hearing is, that we've all got strategies for knocking ourselves out of the dreams, the repetitive, unpleasant dreams, different strategies. And instead, if we could say, I'm not going to try and get away from this, but rather I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to take it as my object of meditation, and not meditation in the sense of sort of sedating myself, but in the sense of being awake to what's going on inside me or in the world around me, whichever, or both. And if you could take it as the object of your awareness, that is much more radical, because then you're not trying to get rid of it anymore. To not try and get rid of it, but to say, okay, I'm going to be aware of this too, because this is what's happening in my mind right now. And then when it stops happening, and it probably will, you may be faster than you wished, that's fine too, you know. And if it goes on, then you're aware of that, and you just let it. That is powerful meditation technique.
If I understand you correctly, that sounds very much like what I'm experiencing. Not so much strategizing,
okay,
but just being in the present moment. I thought I was going to be there sooner. I thought whatever I thought, but the circumstances are exactly what they are right here with me right now, and releasing all of the other stuff.
But you know, you could also, like when you have this anxiety, like they're going to hate me for being late, and you know I shouldn't be late. My mother said I should never be late. You know, whatever it is, you know, that you could take that instead of trying to get rid of the anxiety by becoming philosophical about it or whatever. That you could take that as your object of awareness, your anxiety, and welcome it. You know, it's like a kindness towards the anxiety.
I didn't mean it to sound like pushing it away, but just letting go, releasing it. It's like it's something that's attacking me, and I'm defending myself by embracing the attacker. It just relax. And when I'm present, it's much easier. I have so much more energy to move forward when I'm not trying to be somewhere else, kind of.
Great. 1-1.
Is this like law of attraction in a way that the more you want to push away something or get rid of your certain emotion, the more it stick to you? Like the story of this thing that bites, you know? And so it's not just by accepting it. It is just, like you said, just observing it. And when in the meditation, I try to deal with my fears. So I have this image of me sitting next to me and just being very quiet. This me very quiet, and the other one is suffering. So it feels much more kinder in a way. Yeah, not as like being bitten or being tearing apart. You know, that's strong anymore. Yeah.
Well said. It's such a subtle and difficult thing to come to grips with, because we're constantly making enemies, you know, of different aspects of our lives and our minds and our psyches, and we're saying, I don't want that part. And of course, when you make an enemy like that, you give it life. One does. One makes it real. You know, then if it's an enemy, then it's got to have some reality to it. So it's like we invest it and give it strength by fighting it. Which sounds like what you were describing.
Yeah, and then this really there's a thinking that my mom just passed away from cancer. During her illness, I was studying cancer, and I know how cancer develops right now. It's just like we have cancer cells all over our body, and before it takes on its life, which is the blood supply, it could be there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But once we give it that blood supply life, it grows 1,600 times faster. So this is the same thing. We feed our thought that kind of life. We just give that cancer, a kind of life, and so it just take all over. It grows so fast, and in a way like hijack us. But if we don't give that kind of life instead of just, then it's not cancerous to us.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Michael.
On the other side of this gentle, welcoming approach is something that people can do where, and it's described really nicely in pointing out the Dharmakaya, which is a commentary by Trungpa Rinpoche on a work by the 10th Karmapa. And he describes, it's a Q&A part, and someone describes using placement of attention, as you were saying, feel the breath, as a way of doing shamatha practice. And the commentary was, if the thought is extinguished, that is an indication of too much effort.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, the text that Michael's referring to is huge in Tibetan Buddhism. It's one of the great texts on meditation, pointing out the Dharmakaya by one of the great meditation masters. I once heard Shama Rinpoche asked if he was somebody asked him this stupid question. They said, if you were going to be on a desert island, what 3 books would you want? I can't remember what they were, but that was one of them. Yeah, say it again. I want to hear that again.
If when you are practicing and doing shamatha with whatever technique you're doing, using, and in that context, it was like what you were saying, is placing the attention on the breath. So the way it goes is that you feel the breath, and then you notice that you're not feeling the breath. You notice that you're thinking instead, and then you feel the breath. If at that time the thought is extinguished, that means you have exerted yourself too much in using the technique.
That's
because
great.
There's plenty of room for the thought.
That's great.
So you don't need to squash it.
Yeah, that's really true.
And that happens a lot.
But you can just be aware of it, and then they go. You might want them to stay, and they won't stay. They just fly away. Same thing with the emotions.
And in a lot of ways, what people tend to develop is a sense of that all these thoughts are enemies in some way, and they're not welcome. They're the problem, and I want to extinguish them. I really want to.
Don't we have this approach to meditation? I mean, I've been doing it for years. It's so ingrained that that what meditation is the absence of thought. It's just not. Yes, Rochelle.
Maybe what Trungpa Rinpoche was pointing out was that when you give things space can accommodate everything. When we try to get rid of thoughts, it's very claustrophobic, and you take the space away. There's no space.
Well said. Well, friends, one last. Alan.
Well, we have such a large collection of metaphors, so this is one Ponlop Rinpoche uses. If you have a thought, show them in the front door, and if you have a thought, show it in the front door, and show it out the back door.
That's good. Okay. Well, everybody, it's a wonderful discussion. And I hope you go home and meditate on the emotions. And really, I think we're welcoming the demoness, Tseringma, by bringing her into our awareness rather than trying the thoughts, the emotions. And some of them are really powerful. So let's end by dedicating the merit. We haven't handed out the chant books, have we, this time again? We always do this. Okay, we got them.
Well, some people have a handout, your handout that's different from the dedication of the devotee.
Oh, really? Which is different? Which one? We'll do, if you've got 3 verses in the dedication of merit, we're going to skip the middle one. And that'll make it consistent with what everybody has. We'll just do the first one and the third one. Oh yeah, let's use our chant book here. Okay. Actually. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, fill the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.